Hi, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today we're talking about reading comprehension, how to increase it in your students. This will help you whether you're a reading teacher or a content area teacher like social studies or science or anything like that. And these techniques will also help you on your teacher certification exam because many of you are taking some sort of exam that measures your understanding of how to increase reading comprehension in your students. Let's get started. All right, so today we're going to kill two birds with one stone. We're going to talk about reading comprehension, and everything I talk about today can be applied in your classroom, but also you can remember this stuff for your teacher certification exam. So many of you are teachers right now, and you're trying to pass whatever teacher certifications exams you still have going on, whether it is the elementary education 5001, the reading 5206, 5205, any of these. They're all going to assess language arts and reading, specifically reading in the content area. And why is that? Well, it is the state's position that regardless of what content area you teach, whether it's social studies, science, reading, language arts, even art and PE in some cases, they want you to support the goals, the reading goals of your district. And we do that through content area reading. So today we're going to talk about comprehension, what it is, why it's important, and also how to help your students get there because it is a higher order critical thinking skill. And beyond that, you're going to apply what I talk about today to your teacher certification exams. All right. So let's have a discussion quickly about what comprehension is. So when we're talking about reading acquisition or acquiring skills in reading, comprehension's at the top. Comprehension is when we form pictures in our minds, we predict what's going to happen in the story next, we kind of have an understanding of why characters are doing what they're doing. Because as we're reading, we're taking in all of this information and we're synthesizing it in a way that our brains are doing a higher order process or a critical thinking process. It's at the top of that Bloom's taxonomy. Remember, I did that video not too long ago about Bloom's taxonomy. I'll link it up here. But it's at the top. It's not just identifying keywords. It's not just remembering the name of a character. It's much more than that. It's understanding why things are happening and even you're predicting what might happen next. Now, this happens in both literary text and informational text. Remember, we want to have a balanced literacy program. You'll see that on the exam a lot. We want to use literary text, stories, poems, things like that. And we also want to use a lot of informational text, newspaper articles, textbooks, things like that, because they both support one another and we need to have skills in both areas. Now, in order to have comprehension, you have to have all those foundational skills first. And I've done tons of videos on the foundational skills of reading. So the phonemic awareness, the phonological awareness, the phonics, the fluency, all of that works together to bring us towards that higher order thinking of critical thinking in comprehension. We can't comprehend text when we're using up all of our cognitive energy on decoding words. I'm sure you've seen it. A student is reading a passage and they are sounding out every word in the paragraph. It's exhausting to listen to and it's exhausting to do. That student is using up all of their cognitive energy on decoding. So they don't have anything left for comprehension. So comprehension comes after those skills are already learned. Now, it doesn't mean that we never decode another word again after we've acquired comprehension. In fact, I was just reading a book last night that had a complex word in it, and I went back and used my decoding skills I learned back in second grade in order to decode the word. I still have comprehension, but when I see big, complicated words, I have to go back. That's that recursive approach to my decoding skills to sound that out. Now, once we've gotten there, we've gotten our phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, all of that, and we're in comprehension. We want to help students stay there and even increase it. So there are a couple things we can do for that. Now, listen, you're going to be asked these questions on your teacher certification exam as well. They might be asked in a multiple choice question, or, and more frequently, they will be asked in the open response or the constructed response, depending on which type of test you're taking. Either way, it's the essay portion of the exam. And you might be faced with a group of students who are either struggling with comprehension or perhaps you want to increase comprehension. So here are a couple of things you can do step by step to help your students with comprehension. First, before reading strategies. Very important. It sets the stage for understanding the text and it helps students activate their background knowledge. So we're going to do that. We're going to activate their background knowledge by talking about prior knowledge or schema. It's called a bunch of different things depending on where you're reading it, okay? Schema or background knowledge is helping students make connections to what they already know. This is the K in the KWL chart. Remember, KWL, three columns. The K is, what do you already know about this topic? Now, that's a simple question. We could form the questions a little more nuanced. Let's say we're reading something about a beach cleanup, right? Or beach erosion. Let's say we're in geography class and we're talking about beach erosion. We might say, hey, let's talk about beach erosion. What do we know about what happens on beaches? What just happened recently in a coastal area that may contribute to beach erosion? And the kids might raise their hand about the hurricane that happened recently. And then you get on a discussion about that and you talk about, what did it look like on the news? What did you see? And they might talk about sand coming up onto the shore and being washed away and then brought back up. They might talk about, coastal flooding and things like that. They may talk about the change in the coast, the way the coast looks over, hundreds of thousands of years and things like that. You may just talk about those things as a class. You might even have it as a graphic organizer, like a KWL chart. And in the K column, it's what you already know. You might answer those essential questions. Anything you want to do to activate background knowledge. Sometimes just a quick discussion is all you need. Some teachers like to show a video. Some teachers like to have a picture up. It's all doing the same thing, activating background knowledge or prior knowledge. So when students read the text, they already have that muscle working, okay? And that's going to help them out a lot. Now, the second thing we might do with students, especially if we're reading informational text, is to have a look at the text before we read it. We might pay attention to some headings or graphs. We might have some essential questions inside the text. It doesn't mean we're going to work them out right this second before reading the text, but at least we kind of have an understanding of what's going on and we're not going into the text blind. A lot of times they call this previewing the text, and it just helps so that students understand, this is broken up into sections. There are some highlighted vocabulary words here, that sort of thing. Another pre-reading strategy for comprehension we can do is to pre-teach the vocabulary. If there are some complex pieces of vocabulary inside, let's say the science text or the social studies text, we could pre-teach that on the front end, give examples, maybe apply it to the content that we're going to be reading about, further activating that background knowledge when it comes to complex vocabulary. Now, keep this in mind. These are pre-reading strategies, and they can be applied to your constructed or open response question on your reading exam or whatever teacher certification exam. So anytime you have a student struggling with comprehension, using pre-reading strategies are going to help the student move towards comprehension because it activates the background knowledge, it prepares them to read the type of text they are doing, and it pre-teaches the vocab that they may struggle with as they read. Now, during reading, we might do a few different things. My favorite thing to do during reading is a read aloud, think aloud. So this incorporates modeling, metacognition, and also students practicing their reading aloud. Now, I never make students read aloud who do not want to read aloud. I'm sure you've seen a lot of my videos on this. Students should feel comfortable to read aloud. And so what I like to do is say that we are going to read aloud today. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take a little list of volunteers. Raise your hand if you would like to read aloud. And I write those students' name on a sticky note, and I randomly call on those students because they are prepared and ready to go. This does two things. Number one, those who don't want to read aloud are not called upon, and they can simply just focus on the text. The second thing is it doesn't stop the flow of the reading where I have to stop and say, who wants to read? Come on, guys, somebody help me read. That stops the flow of reading. If I already have my list of students there, I can just randomly pick on them. They are prepared and willing to read aloud. Now, one of the things we can do to help foster comprehension is model. That's when the teacher models first how to read the text and how to use our brains. Metacognition, which is essential for reading comprehension, is thinking about our thinking. What does that mean? That means that as we read, we know, you know what? I need to use my vocabulary skills to read around this word here because it's a little bit complicated. Or, I don't really know what this says. Let me go over here to the graph and see if that helps me. You are basically understanding how the processes in the mind work, and you're applying them to the task you are using. Now, as adults, we do this all the time. We take it for granted, but kids, students, and even college students, all of us need to be reminded of metacognition. So the read aloud, think aloud helps us do that. So I've already got my list of students that are going to read, but first I am going to start reading. I am going to model how I want students to read. I'm also going to let students know that I'm going to periodically stop you during your reading. The reason why I tell students this is because sometimes students get upset when you stop them because they want to get through the end of the paragraph. So I make it very clear. Listen, if we get to a part of the paragraph and it's complex and I want to discuss it, I'm going to stop you. Okay. So don't get frustrated. It's just because I think we need to read it aloud and talk about it aloud. So what I do is I model first. So I might read the first section or the first paragraph, and I have students follow along. And as I get to complex things inside the text or aha moments or interesting situations, I stop and I think aloud. I say, wow, you know what? I remember photosynthesis from last year about how plants use light and energy and make energy and all of that. This makes a lot of sense here because now we're talking about X, Y, and Z. And the students are listening to me kind of go through that in my head and express it out loud. And then once I'm done with my modeling, I have the next student read. And then that student reads, I might stop the student and say, hey, what do you think about that word? Or how did you work that out to figure out what that word said or how to sound out that word? And they express themselves that way. So that's read aloud, think aloud. Now, beyond that, you can also do silent, sustained reading, independent reading. Usually not the correct answer on your teacher certification exams because independent reading on the exam is usually attached to struggling students. And if students are struggling, we want to employ, the read aloud, think aloud, or chunking the text, taking pieces of the text and simplifying them a little bit, perhaps using a graphic organizer while they read to answer some essential questions. All of that helps with struggling students. Independent reading is for students who have it and are now going to read on their own. So if it's attached to struggling students, independent reading typically is not the right answer. But if you want to increase students' comprehension who already have it, independent reading is a good one. So let's review what the comprehension strategy is during reading. So number one, read aloud, think aloud. We might, use that metacognition together as we read aloud. Chunking the text, taking smaller pieces of the text and discussing it. And then, of course, graphic organizers while reading the text. They might fill something out like a Venn diagram or a semantic map or even a sequencing map, what happens first, second, and third in the story, paragraph, or excerpt. And finally, after reading strategies really help with comprehension. So many things you can do in this area. First, you could just have a class discussion about it and make sure you're asking higher order questions. So instead of saying, name the characters of the story, that's easy. They can just rattle that off. You might say something like, how do they interact and how does that push the story forward? Or why do you think the character did this? Or if it's informational text, how did you figure out that this happens in photosynthesis? Or what stood out to you when it comes to photosynthesis and why? And so you just kind of push them into those higher order thinking questions. How, why, and say more about that are all ways to push your students towards comprehension, critical thinking, and making them sort of use their metacognition and all of those skills to think critically about the text. All right, so let's recap the things you can do before, during, and after reading in order to foster comprehension. First, before reading strategies. Activating background knowledge or schema is essential. Asking questions, showing a video, projecting a picture on the board, anything to get the students thinking about the text. Perhaps you do a KWL chart, and the K in the KWL chart is what do you already know about the topic, and start discussing it and get the brain moving about that particular topic. Another thing you can do before reading is previewing the text, especially if it's informational text. So headings, pre-teaching vocabulary, all of that is going to set your students up for success with comprehension. Now, during reading, there's lots of things we can do, but my favorite is read aloud, think aloud, where we are modeling metacognition. We have a group of students who have volunteered to read the text. I am modeling as a teacher how to read the text, ask myself questions, answer those questions aloud, and then transfer that over to students who want to read aloud and discuss the text together. We can also chunk the text so it's a little bit easier for students to digest, especially if it's complex informational text. And you can also do a little bit of independent reading, but remember, independent reading is for those who have already mastered their reading skills and comprehension. So independent reading is like bumping it up because they are alone on that journey because it's independent. And then finally, after reading, we can do some follow-up questions. How, why, say more about that. We can also fill out the remainder of our graphic organizer. Perhaps we answer some essential questions that have to do with the text, and we further discuss what's going on. And we make sure that we are setting our sights on those higher order thinking questions and skills so students are stretching beyond their comfort zones, really thinking about the text, and having an understanding of how their brain works when it comes to reading comprehension. All right, so right there you have a plethora of things to use in your classroom. Remember, all of this works with informational and literary text. So it doesn't matter if you're teaching science or social studies or reading, you can use these strategies in any content area. And also remember this for your teacher certification exam. I don't recommend using all of these strategies when you answer your questions on your teacher certification exams because it's going to be too much. You want to grab one or two, perhaps activating background knowledge and questioning techniques, or read aloud, think aloud. Any of those will work as you answer those questions in your open and constructed response on your teacher certification exams. Now, I have a ton of resources for you, whether it is a study guide that you need to pass your certification exam or a book to help you with your first 1 to 3 years of teaching. I've got you. Let me show you where to get these resources because this will help you tremendously in your teaching journey. All right, so this is my website, KathleenJasper.com. And if you go over to study guides, you can see I have tons of study guides here for you. Teaching Reading is one of our best sellers, so you can check that out. I also have online courses, and this new one, Teach a Survival Course for New Educators, goes with my book here. This is going to help you with your first 1 to 3 years of teaching. Lots of strategies, how to lesson plan, classroom management, lots of good stuff here, and only $39.99. We also just started doing these audio courses that people really love. They go with the study guides, like this 5205 Teaching Reading has really helped people pass their reading exam. You can see the audio courses here. This audio course has been very helpful for people trying to pass their teaching reading exams, and people use this for the Pearson Foundations of Reading 190, the STR in Texas. This will help you with any teaching reading exam, and paired with the study guide, it is really, really good. And then, of course, on Amazon, I have Teach a Survival Guide for New Educators. It's got tons of 5-star ratings. I'm very proud of this book. It's $14.99 in paperback. It's $0 if you have Kindle Unlimited. You can just download it, and $9.99 on Kindle. And we have a ton of 5-star reviews. People have really enjoyed the book, and it makes me so proud that they have gotten a lot out of it. I'll link everything up in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much and have a great day.